Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneDrop, created for people with diabetes by people who have diabetes. By Real Good Foods, real food you feel good about eating. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
This week, Eli Lilly announced they were getting into the pump and pen business almost 2 years ago. How's it going? We get an update, and of course, I ask about price and access.
Look, we're not here for the sake of having this innovation sit on a shelf somewhere. It's not why I'm here. It's not why others are here. And so it is really important for us to be laser focused on how people access the system.
That's Marie Schiller, Vice President of Product Development for Connected Care and Insulins at Lilly. We'll also have a bit of an update on some other pump companies' plans for the near future. Bolusing from your phone? In Tell Me Something Good, a big fish, a hula hoop winner, and a chance meeting over a foot? This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am your host, Stacey Simms. So glad to have you along for another week. As always, we aim to educate and inspire by sharing stories of connection. My son was diagnosed 13 years ago with type 1 diabetes. My husband lives with type 2. I do not have diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, and that's how you get the podcast. I'm excited to catch up with Lilly. I know a lot of people don't want to hear anything from them until they address the price of insulin, and I do understand that. I want to be sensitive to that, and I definitely asked Marie all about that, even though she has nothing to do with the price of insulin, but she does work at Lilly, and this system can't be really separated from that, let's be honest. But I also think I have a responsibility to share what's going on in terms of diabetes technology, and Lilly plans to be a big player in this space. So that's what the interview is all about. We'll be talking about their system. We'll be talking about their partnership with Dexcom and other things as they move forward. Before we get to that, I want to thank Carrie Sparling and the folks at Children with Diabetes. We replayed the interview that Carrie did with me. This was on their YouTube channel. And then last week in the kind of the mini episode, although it wasn't really a mini, we replayed the audio from that interview. It's always a little weird for me to be on the other side of the microphone, but it's always a lot of fun too. I bring it up not to hammer on the interview again. If you wanted to see it or listen, you know where to find it, and I will link it up in this episode, but because they are doing a contest. The contest is open until March 20th, and to enter, you do have to email them. So I will link that up as well. It's over on the Children with Diabetes website, but all of these links will be in the episode homepage. They're giving away a paperback of The World's Worst Diabetes Mom and the audio version. So I'd love for you to go and enter and find out more on their websites. Speaking of the book, I am having such a blast on the book tour that I'm doing this year. We'll see how it goes. Obviously, there are some health scares out there right now, and I'm not sure that all the events are going to stay as scheduled. But for right now, they're all on the books. That's on the website as well. And if you're interested in The World's Worst Diabetes Mom, that's an easy place to find out more. But I have to share with you that I got a great note from a woman in Australia who listens to the show and has read my book. She bought it. You can get it on Amazon, really in so many countries now. Print on demand is absolutely amazing. And she got it in Australia. And she reached out to me because her local group wants to do a bulk order. So we are doing that. And if you have a situation like that where you would like a large number of books for your group, please reach out to me directly. You don't have to just buy it on Amazon for the full retail price. I am happy to work with you. My publisher has given me some ways to do this that really make sense. It's an amazing thing to think about people all over the world reading The World's Worst Diabetes Mom. I didn't say America's Worst Diabetes Mom, so I guess I have to stand by that now. All right. We will have the interview with Marie Schiller from Lilly coming up in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about Real Good Foods. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by them. Have you tried their cauliflower crust margarita pizza? They have a full size and a personal size as well. So yummy. It is low carb, high protein, real simple ingredients. And you got to be careful because some cauliflower crust pizzas are made with cornstarch, rice flours, processed grains. And if you're looking for something that is 100% grain-free and gluten-free, this is what you're looking for. I love how Real Good Foods keeps creating new products. They keep coming out with new yummy foods for us. It's the kind of thing where, sometimes you don't feel like cooking. Sometimes you want the convenience. And when you go for convenience, you really don't want to sacrifice nutrition, right? I mean, you don't want to just pull out some junk food. I love Real Good Foods. It tastes terrific. And the people behind them are solid. They get involved in our community. They listen to what we have to say. It's really nice. Find out more. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. My guest this week is Marie Schiller, Vice President of Product Development for Connected Care and Insulins at Lilly. 2 years ago, I was part of a group of writers and reporters from the diabetes community invited to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to take a look at Lilly's entrance into the pump and pen market, to give feedback on those plans and to hear from their partners. We did an episode back then, and I'll link up what I and others wrote at the time. No pictures still of what they showed us very briefly that day. They showed us kind of the prototype, but it is a tiny pump. It's kind of like a fat little disc. It's much smaller than an Omnipod pod. It's maybe about the size of the T-Sport that Tandem is coming out with. I'm actually going to talk more about that after this interview, a pump update from Tandem, some news from Omnipod. We'll get to that after this interview. But I'll put up some photos of the T-Sport. But this is thinner than that. The Lilly pump is this small, thin disc. It is tubed. So the idea is that you can stick it to your body or use longer tubing and put it in your pocket. We do talk about that. It'll fit in the palm of your hand very easily. Of course, we do talk about the price of insulin and what that means for access of anything coming from Lilly. So here is my interview with Marie Schiller. Marie, thanks for talking to me. I'm excited to catch up. It's been about almost 2 years since we met in Cambridge. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back.
All right, so give us the update. I know we're going to talk about the partnership with Dexcom and some other things that Lilly is working on. But when we last left this episode, the last time we talked, at least in person, you all were talking about the device that Lilly had been working on. Can you give us an update on that?
I can. And maybe to be helpful, Stacey, just to remind the audience of what we've been working on. So Lilly has a personalized diabetes management system that is incorporating insulin delivery devices, software, and analytics. And obviously that will be combined with glucose data and other contextual information in order to hopefully to improve diabetes management. We have two parts of that system. So we obviously have a pen-based platform where we'll be using our pre-filled disposable insulin pen with data coming in from glucose monitoring devices and be able to combine that with different elements of care in that platform. And then the pump-based platform, which would be a hybrid closed-loop system, integrating the pump itself in with a continuous glucose monitoring and an algorithm as well. So that's the journey we started on. I think we had not just kicked off the program when we last talked a couple of years ago, but it was certainly early in the development program. It's been frankly an awesome couple of years advancing both of those areas. We had started, I know when we last talked, but with the development agreement with Dexcom, which we have continued to advance our relationship with Dexcom and now have entered into a global commercialization agreement with them. We've continued our clinical trials with the pump-based system. We'll be talking about some of the first clinical data will be shared this coming February at the conference in Madrid, ATTD. And on the connected pen side, we have, so we've secured a supplemental drug approval for the pen that will be compatible with the personalized diabetes management system. And we're in the midst of working with the FDA on the other components of that system that we will need to bring forward and launch the entirety of that integrated solution.
So there's a lot of moving parts there, a lot of different things going on. You mentioned the clinical trials, and let's kind of take this step by step. I'm sure you can't share the information ahead of the release, but what were you looking for? This was for the pump system. Was this a safety trial? Was this an outcome trial? Can you share any information?
Sure. I won't go into any details that we will be sharing at the conference, but as has been seen with other products going through on that hybrid closed-loop system, we are focused on showing that the system is functioning accurately. So we are looking at that first stage, looking at different, stress situations with the system, making sure the system is responding as we would expect it to respond. And obviously, as part of that is the safety of the system.
So as we're talking about this system, what's so intriguing about it to me is that it is a pump, but it acts more like a pod. At least it did when I last saw it, or last saw a mock-up of it even. So is it still that way? It's very teeny tiny, but it acts as a tubed pump with a very small tube that goes into a traditional inset. Is that still the hardware?
It is. So what we like to call it is a hybrid system, meaning on the days that you want to carry it and put it in your pocket or wherever is your choice of carrying it, you could use a standard length infusion set or a long infusion set, whatever your preference. But on days that you wanted to wear it and adhere it to your body, you could do that. And so it would still work with a standard catheter infusion set, but you would obviously be using a shorter tube in that instance if you choose to wear it on those days.
It's funny, Marie, I didn't ask this when I first saw it 2 years ago, and I keep thinking about it because now Tandem has I don't know where they are in their development stage. They have the T-Sport, which sounds very similar, that they're hoping to come out with. How do you actually wear these tiny tubed pumps, the hybrid pumps, on the body? Do they just kind of dangle from the tube? Do you stick them to your skin? How does it work?
Yeah, I can't comment on Tandem. It's a great question, though, Stacey. Obviously with ours, so there's an adhesive component where you are wearing the pump. It's not obviously on the infusion set, right? But ours is where you would be adhering to the pump itself.
And my frustration was I thought you were going to say I can't tell you anything, but that's great. There's like a sticky on the pump and it sticks to your skin?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to keep asking. You can tell me you can't say anything.
Yes, I will need to experience it hopefully soon.
Oh, no, I'm going to ask you. You have to say no comment, but I'm going to ask you. Does it stick to the body is it like a Dexcom sticky, or is it like the Eversense, which is more like what I call a color forms? Remember those color forms? You could take them on and off and on and off. Is it more like that? Or is it once it's stuck to your skin, then you kind of have to pry it off?
Yeah, I may at this point just pull back a little bit because I think I may be going down a rabbit hole if I'm trying. I feel like I'm going to be playing a game of charades as I try to talk you through how the system works, and it may be more confusing than helpful. So yeah, as I mentioned, you have the ability to wear it, and there's an adhesive system, and we'll leave it at that.
All right, but it's very interesting. So then my next question is, do you know if Lilly is going to be developing new infusion sets? And I ask this because I have shared for years and years, and I'm not the only one, that I really think that the traditional infusion sets are the weak link of any pump. They're just not great. And I'm always hoping that somebody's going to come out with a better one. Any chance this is part of your plan?
As we've talked about, look, we are looking at all components of the system, right? And so we are starting with our core system. We're looking at all aspects of the system. I would say, it's hard for me to say yes or no on that side. I think we're looking at the need in the marketplace, right? I think on that infusion set side, I'd be curious to sort of hear your experience with that. I think in some of the research we've seen, it's different sort of aspects where people would say they'd like improvement. Clearly, extended wear is something that we're hearing a lot. I know JDRF and other groups are focused on that. But what areas are high on your list?
That they work better, that you can push more insulin through them, that they don't get kinked and they don't get occluded, and they don't need, that they're not as damaging to the skin, that they're not as painful. That I mean, I could go on and on and on. But truly, I really think they're the weak link of pumping. And, that they even, what was the one from BD for a while? Like, it had a better flow. It didn't just flow at the bottom of the cannula.
Right.
Even to be able to rotate it. There was one you used to be able to spin, that would go with, that would turn. There's so much. So sure, I'll be in a focus group anytime, Marie. Call me up.
I'm taking serious notes here to make sure I get all of this feedback, because this is exactly what we need to hear, and exactly what we're excited about. I think we just continue continue to feel that there's so much room for improvement on these systems, albeit we've made a ton of progress to date. But these are all of the nuances, right, that each of us deal with every day, and why, the more innovation, the better in this space where we can continue to look at all of these elements and make progress.
So let's talk about the pen system too, because that's very useful and very fascinating. The pen is, as you had already said, it is not just an insulin pen. It is part of a connected system. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? We've mentioned Dexcom already. I assume you use your phone. You can see where you've been. It recommends dosing, that kind of thing. Right back to my talk with Marie, but first, OneDrop is diabetes management for the 21st century. OneDrop was designed by people with diabetes for people with diabetes. OneDrop's glucose meter looks nothing like a medical device. It is sleek, compact, and seamlessly integrates with the award-winning OneDrop mobile app. Sync all your other health apps to OneDrop to keep track of the big picture and easily see health trends. And with a OneDrop subscription, you get unlimited test strips and lancets delivered right to your door. Every OneDrop plan also includes access to your own certified diabetes coach. Have questions but don't feel like waiting for your next doctor visit? Your personal coach is always there to help. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneDrop logo to learn more. Now back to Marie, answering my question on what a connected system means and whether the pens help keep track of dosing as we'd expect.
It does. So as we mentioned, it's based on the QuickPen platform is a core component of it. So if you look at the QuickPen platform that we offer our insulins in, we have our current Basaglar insulins and Humalog, both in the half unit, 1 unit, and 2 units. And then we have our ultra rapid insulin that's under review today. So and I don't know, was your son ever on pens before you moved to pumps?
He was actually on syringes because the dosing was so teeny tiny, and they didn't even have half units, but he was on quarter units. But we use pens a lot because it's a backup for him. If he gets too high and feels like his infusion set isn't working, he'll take a shot. And he is also a little unusual in that we use a long-acting shot with the pump. So he does use a pen every day.
Okay, well then you're familiar with it. And I can share with you that I was a pumper for years and now I'm back to shots as we all sort of go through those journeys. But what I was going to describe is when you're taking those insulins, especially as you know, you're taking the long acting and the short acting, there are just some basic elements that we still don't have today, right? You're running out the door, you're trying to get your son to school, or I'm trying to get to work. Did I just take that shot or not? I can't remember, right? And just some of the simplest aspects of being able to be like, there it is, I took that dose, right? And being able to have that check in place. But there are, as you move down that level of sophistication, most people on insulin require some level of glucose testing, whether that is blood glucose monitoring or as we're doing with the continuous glucose monitor. So the idea is that you would have the insulin data from the pen. You would have your glucose data, whether that's blood glucose or CGM data, and you would take that and integrate them into this diabetes management system that, depending on what you want, is how you would interact with that system. So some would have a preference of saying, you know what, I'm doing okay, or my regimen may be easier, or I don't need as much variation. So for me, it's a place that I can capture that data and not have to go to 2 different places to get that data. For others, having some different elements of support in that system will be beneficial, right? If you think about things on the basal insulin side for people with type 2 diabetes, basal titration as you get started on the insulin, or maybe after I'm on insulin for a couple of years, how do I make sure I'm optimizing, right? You can go through sort of that journey and see all of these different places where, wow, we can do better than we're doing today. And I'm honing in on the glucose data and the insulin data. But we all know, I sometimes say life gets in the way, right? Exercise and food, all those things that are pretty standard, but for a lot of us can make the road pretty bumpy as we're out there. So over time, being able to get the system smarter and smarter with that exercise data and then learning systems. So, we all talk about the algorithms that are out today are very much sort of rule-based systems, right? If my glucose is going up by this level, I take this action and then the insulin is delivered. In the future, it may be, well, for Marie, her level is going up at X rate, and that's not good for Marie, versus for Stacey, that might be okay because I've trended back and looked at that data and say, we're going to predict that she won't get to an elevated level, as an example, right? So if you start thinking about the personalization of these algorithms over time, it will not be day one, as we all know. It's going to take a lot more research and data for us to be able to continue to get to that ideal state.
So I'm trying to read between the lines. So the plan sounds like it is to launch with let's call it a more static algorithm. Like we just started using Control IQ from Tandem, which is a hybrid closed loop software system. It is a great system for us so far, but it doesn't learn anything. It's programmed if this, then that, but it doesn't learn, my son. It's not personalized. So I'm assuming you're kind of saying that Lilly will launch in a similar way, but the idea would be to eventually get to a learning algorithm?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement.
All right, so let's talk about the announcement that you're going to be working with Dexcom. Just if you could spend a minute talking about what that means. It's not exclusive, as I read the release that you all sent over, so it sounds pretty interesting. Let's start with what it means first to work with Dexcom. Are they making... Sometimes I hear special transmitters for certain things, certain software for certain things. Is this a Lilly Dexcom original?
No, meaning we are basing it off of the transmitter that Dexcom has. So we will be compatible with the G6, and we'll continue to work with Dexcom in our development arrangement as they continue to iterate and we continue to iterate to make sure we've got access to each other's latest technologies, right? Because the last thing any of us want to do in these collaborations is to be behind in generations in integration, right? I mean, that's what was happening in some of the first generation systems, right? You'd have people still on, I think it was G4, and they'd want to be moving to the G6, and there was no way to do those updates, or the G5. So we've established through our development work with them an ability to make sure that we can continue to be running in parallel as each of our platforms evolve over time. So it will be based on their latest transmitter, based on our latest pump and our latest pen, and be able to integrate the CGM data from Dexcom systems into the diabetes management system, where some of the functionality that I talked about before could be available.
So I'm always trying to read between the lines. You'll have to forgive me. But when I see a press release that says non-exclusive, I'm always thinking, I don't know of too many or any pump systems. Gosh, it's so funny to say that, Marie, because there's really only a couple in the U.S. But I don't know if we hear a lot about interoperability, but it isn't here yet. Yeah. So my question, I guess, is when I see non-exclusive, I'm thinking, okay, do you have an eye to working with other CGM companies? And is that practical in the short term when we all know FDA approvals, things like that? You really kind of have to stick with one system, at least so far, to get it through.
Yeah, it's an interesting way you sort of pose the question. I think, let me say big picture and then sort of dive down to where we are right now. At the end of the day, we believe having access to sort of the latest and greatest technologies is really important, right? I mentioned even with Dexcom that we want to be on the same innovation curve that they're on, so people using our system can have access to that. It's really important that all of us keep pushing for this innovation, right? And the way that you do that is to make sure that I have the ability to integrate other technologies into my system. And I think both of us hold that premise that keeping as a non-exclusive allows both of our teams to be able to, have access or have our users of our system have access, I should say, to the latest and greatest technology. Mm-hmm. We have started our program with Dexcom and are really excited about the progress, but we think it's important to make sure that we will have the opportunity to bring different technologies in for different users. even on the systems available today, right, there are differences in the system, and people are choosing different platforms because of that.
Sure. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I keep hearing about interoperability, which I know is going to come someday, but my interpretation of that, which is I always call it the Mr. Potato Head system, is not the realistic system. So I try to temper my expectations. But why not? Come on, I want to mix and match as much as possible. Why not?
I don't know. Did you like playing Mr. Potato Head? I was never a huge fan of Mr. Potato Head.
Well, it's an easier thing to explain, right? Why can't I use the Libre with the tandem pump? Why can't I use a Dexcom with a Bigfoot pen? Why can't, right? I mean, if it works better for me and my skin and my kid and why can't I? And I get it. But at the same time, I really hope that someday we're working towards that. Hey, look, it could be worse for me. They could make us play Operation or Perfection or something terrible like that. Those are worse.
Yeah, but you know what, Stacey, I think there are a lot of people where having that sort of turnkey solution is, where it all comes in one and I just understand it and it's all designed to work together. They prefer that, and other people would like that choice, right? So I think we're going to probably see both of those emerge over time. And the FDA, to be fair, has opened the door to that a bit, right? I mean, they're trying hard to separate the approval of each of the components. We saw that with the ACE pump, and we've seen that with iCGM, and now with iController that Tandem has. So, I think at least from the FDA's perspective, they've worked hard to try to enable some of that.
I agree. All right. So from interoperability, let's talk about the proprietary aspect of this, because I think when a company like Lilly that makes insulin gets involved with the hardware in which the insulin goes, a lot of questions come up. And you mentioned the quick pen. So can you just confirm again, and correct me if I'm wrong, will other insulins be able to be used in either of these systems, pen or pump?
Yeah, so on the pen side, the system is being built around our Quick Pen platform. And so it will be a system that works with Lilly's insulin. On the pump side of the equation, in addition, we'll have a first generation that will be a patient-built component, but over time that may shift as well. So on the life cycle plan for that pump, we'll look at the ability to have Lilly insulin in that system as well.
Okay. So to be clear, and not putting a judgment on this, but just to be clear, the idea is that this would be a proprietary pump, that Lilly would make the pump and Lilly would want its own insulin, would want Humalog used in the pump.
Yeah, I think the system is being designed around Lilly's insulin.
All right. So, Marie, we've known each other for a while now, and I know this question is coming. But I think it has to be asked, in a day and age where people are so angry about the pricing of insulin, why should we get excited about systems like this when people are worried about affording the stuff that goes in the hardware, let alone affording the hardware, whatever it is and how great it is? There's a lot of concerns about cost. I know it's not your department, but I can't have you on and not ask about it. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you asking it. And Stacey, you have known me for a while as well, so I appreciate the sort of candid question. Look, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We are committed to be able to let people with diabetes access our medicines, and in the future, this connected diabetes system that will include sort of the pen-based system and the pump and other components. I know you'll be frustrated at this next part of it, but I can't sit here in sort of the position I'm in and where we are with this platform to be give you any speculation of the details of how that will happen or how that reimbursement will be in the marketplace. It just wouldn't be fair to you or your users to speculate on that, except to say that we are 100% committed to making sure that access is available. Look, we're not here for the sake of having this innovation sit on a shelf somewhere. Not why I'm here. It's not why others are here. And so it is really important for us to be laser focused on how people access the system.
And I mentioned in the introduction, but you live with type 1 diabetes. I definitely have another question for you, but it just occurred to me. Are you allowed to even say this? Have you tried this system? Are you in the trial? Can you trial your own pump or pen?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I am not in the trials. I can give you that answer. So I am not in the clinical trials that have occurred to date.
I'll tell you, as a person who doesn't have diabetes, obviously, it's just something that I always wonder about when I talk to researchers or clinicians, or I know there's obviously rules for clinical trials, but you've got to think, all right, I want to try this on myself. I know a lot of people have done that. Okay. So the real question I wanted to ask,
I haven't. I'll tell you, I can't wait. That's why we're pushing hard to get this available. I'm waiting like others to make sure that I can get this.
All right. So I've got a difficult question. So my real question about living with type 1 is, how difficult is it right now to work at Lilly when people are so angry, and a lot of that is directed? We've seen protests at Lilly headquarters, and again, it's not you're not in the price department, even if there is one. This is not something I know you can control. But is it difficult and frustrating for you to see the problem, frankly, with insulin pricing at all of the insulin companies?
My answer to Stacey, and I think we may have talked about this either the last time on the phone or when I saw you, is look, how do you not feel the pain in the, from people, right? I mean, this is difficult issues people are dealing with. So of course, what I would say is that worse from, being here. I look at what we're trying to do and again, I'm not the person to sort of comment on this, but it's a priority for Lilly. And I'm really proud that Lilly has made it a priority to make sure that access is there.
Going back to the devices that we've been talking about, I always hate to ask about timelines, but I always have to ask about timelines. Can you give us a goal timeline here? Is there any indication of when it might be submitted to the pen or the pump, and which will kind of, go in first?
Yeah, so let's talk about the pen first. So as I mentioned, and you can see on the FDA site, the supplemental approval for the pen has gone through. We are working with the agency on the other components of the systems. We are not giving an update right now on the timeline for that system, but we expect to be giving updates over the next couple of months. On the pump, as I mentioned, we'll be sharing the first clinical data and are signaling that we're still over the next couple of years hoping to get that system to market.
Marie, thank you so much for joining me. I know it's a difficult conversation to have when you've got, a lot of things about to come out and then other things that I'm asking that aren't really your department, but I appreciate your frankness. Before I let you go, as a person who lives with type 1, what is it like to work in the diabetes sphere? I mean, I think part of me would be kind of tired, like my whole day is diabetes, my whole life is diabetes, but it's got to be exciting as well. What's it like?
It's an interesting question. For me, I just don't know any different. Stacey, maybe that's the right answer is, I don't know. My kids would probably answer the same way. I don't know what I would do with myself if I wasn't doing this all day. My weekends are spent so much in the diabetes space as well. It's just something that is, it's just a part of me, right? So much a part of all of us who are living in this space. And I'm impressed every day by all of the people working so hard to make these advancements. And it's amazing, right? As you've seen, we're actually getting some of these solutions out and reading about the improvements that are there. And I'm excited and want to keep staying focused on doing what I can to get these products out and having my team, man, I mean, everybody here is just so passionate about what we're trying to do to make these advancements. So it's, I know it's like one of those questions someone would ask, what would you do if you worked with your spouse, I don't want to say I love my diabetes so much because I'm not sure I'd answer that way. I curse my diabetes maybe as much as I do other things in life, but it's that reason that probably keeps us all motivated as we know how much better we can make life.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it, and I hope we get a snapshot of the devices soon enough. Marie, thanks again.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
Of course, more information at diabetes-connections.com. I always link up a lot more info at the episode homepage and a transcript. I'll be interested to see how this episode is received. As I mentioned at the start of the show, there are some people who do not want to hear anything from Lilly if it's not about lowering the price of insulin. And I respect that. I hear that. I know that there's a lot of anger in our community and a lot of frustration at all the insulin makers. And, I do share a lot of that. But I would be curious to think if we should not be following the other technology advances that are coming out of these companies. Because I'll be honest with you, and I said this 2 years ago, I think Lilly is seeing the writing on the wall that the price of insulin is going to be mandated to come down in the next few years. And they don't want to lose money. They want to find other ways to continue to be competitive. And I certainly don't think that insulin will be free, but I do think that going into the pen and pump business is a move on their part with an eye on the price of insulin coming down. Look, I'm not an economist. I may be way off base, but that is something that makes sense to me. All right, we will see. Up next, tell me something good. And then a little bit later on, I want to talk about some other pump companies and news that came out recently. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. Do you know about Dexcom Clarity? It is their diabetes management software, and for a long time, I just thought it was something our endo used. You can use it, though, both on the desktop or as an app on your phone. It's an easy way to keep track of the big picture. I check it about once a week. It really helps Benny and me dial back and see longer-term trends and helps us not overreact to what happened for just one day or just 1 hour. The overlay reports help put context to Benny's glucose levels and patterns. You can even share the reports with your care team, which makes appointments a lot more productive. Look, managing diabetes is not easy, but I feel like we have one of the very best CGM systems working for us. Find out more at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. I love the Tell Me Something Good stories this week. Honestly, I love them every week. But I got a bunch that are so fun to share and one that, frankly, is pretty important. All right, so first, Candace says, my son was just diagnosed January 23rd of this year with a hospital stay. By February 13th, he was dancing away and winning a hula hoop contest at his first school dance since diagnosis. He's 11, and he was so proud of his accomplishment, winning the contest. And we as parents were so happy that his diagnosis wasn't holding him back. That is so cool. I did ask Candace for a picture. Shockingly, an 11-year-old did not want pictures of him hula hooping to be displayed. I'm actually not sure if she had any, but we respect that. We hear it. I just think it's fantastic that he did it and that he's doing so well this soon after diagnosis. Way to go, Candace. Allison said, this is a tiny thing, but today my child with type 1 went to get her foot x-rayed. Her shirt rode up and showed her Dexcom, and the text said, hey, do you have diabetes? I do too. Then she pulled out her pump. It was super cool. Allison says her child was diagnosed in early December. I think that's great. Is there anything better than that diabetes in the wild sighting, right? You know you're with people who get it. It's just so great. And then this one you may have seen on social media. I posted a picture of Isabella with her fish, not her pet fish, a fish she caught. Isabella is 9 years old and she loves fishing with her dad. And boy, is she beaming in this photo with a fish that's like as big as she is. Her mother, Heather, says she was diagnosed with type 1 at age 4. Again, she's 9. Heather says, I will tell you this little girl is amazing. Her dad got diagnosed with lupus almost 4 years ago. He is on dialysis. We are on a kidney transplant list. I'm currently trying to be his donor, and a lot goes into that. This is her and her daddy's favorite thing to do. They live life to the fullest, and nothing stops them. Heather, thank you so much for sharing this story, for letting us share the picture of Isabella. You guys are carrying a heavy load right now, and I'm so glad to hear that you're finding enjoyment in things like this. It's kind of trite as I'm hearing these words leave my mouth. I mean, there's really not much to say when you're in a situation like that, but I'm happy to share your story, and I hope you keep us posted. Let us know what's going on. And definitely send more fish pictures. I would love to see that. I really would. Even if we don't share them, you can definitely send them our way or post in the Facebook group. Our final Tell Me Something Good is a little bit of a different story. It's more of a news story, but this is really important and I think very good news. Beyond Type 1 announced that they are collaborating with the National Association of School Nurses to raise awareness of the warning signs of type 1 diabetes. So this is a new collaboration that means that tens of thousands of school nurses around the country are going to get these awareness materials from Beyond Type 1. If you haven't seen these, we did a North Carolina push a few years ago, and they're just simple and straightforward, and they tell you the signs, and they talk about what to look for. I don't think those of us in the community had any idea what DKA was, what it looked like, how deadly it could be, before we or our children were diagnosed, right? How would you know? So this education campaign is absolutely going to save lives. Huge thanks to Beyond Type 1, and a big thanks to the Helmsley Charitable Trust, which is funding it. I will keep you posted. I will put up links in the show notes on how you can get involved because, ordinary people state to state are getting involved. We sat around my dining room table here outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and stuffed envelopes and sent them out. You really can make a difference. Tell me something good. It happens every week around here. Give me your stories. Post in the Facebook group. Email me, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. I would really love to hear from you. We got to get the good news out in our community. Tell me something good. All right, we're getting a little long here, but I wanted to bring you some news from the other pump companies. I know I don't usually do a news update this far down in the show, but because I put the coronavirus episode out a little early, there was some news I was going to put into that episode that has gotten pushed here. Let me get right to it. We had an earnings call from Tandem, and the really interesting bits from that were that the T-Sport hybrid patch pump is now expected later this year, possibly, probably early 2021. The CEO of Tandem says they plan to file with the FDA for T-Sport approval this summer with a new mobile app, which means you'll be able to bolus from your smartphone. So apparently they're going to submit this in two different ways, two different filings. One would be a separate handheld device, right, like a dummy phone or a dummy controller of some kind that you'd bolus from. I'm dummy in that it doesn't do anything else but control the pump. But the other filing would be remote bolusing by the smartphone app. And apparently the CEO said they will not launch T-Sport until both have been okayed by the FDA. So you would have the option of using your phone or of using the singular, let's call it singular controller rather than the dummy controller. So that's really exciting. I'm going to post some pictures. Diabetes Mine posted this update and posted some pictures of the T-Sport. It is a little patch pump that can be worn on the body, or it has a tube so it can be put in your pocket. Again, I don't know how it sticks to the body. Did you hear me talking to Marie about that? Is it reusable like Eversense? Or is it like a Dexcom and you rip it off, or a pump inset? So we'll find out more about these things as they go forward. But that was some really interesting news from Tandem. The other bit of news comes from Insulet. They are in the middle of clinical trials for Horizon. They had hoped to be filing for that approval this summer. Horizon is the hybrid closed loop for the Omnipod. They did have a software issue. That means they are pausing the pivotal study, and it's going to delay things. Not really sure how long. Of course, they're really hoping that it won't be too long, maybe a month or so. But they are now pushing the anticipated launch of Horizon to early 2021. And I know there's a lot of disappointment because people really want this system. I will say to you that Tandem had a similar issue with their software during the last pivotal trial for Control-IQ. It was very quickly fixed. I don't think it affected the timeline that much. Maybe it was just a month, but it still hit its goal of the end of the year. So hopefully Omnipod, Insulet can get back on this and get back to their timeline. But I will link up more information on that because I know these things just cannot come to market soon enough. All right. Thank you for staying with me. This was a long bit after the interview, and I appreciate it, but I wanted to get some information out there. I really appreciate you listening. There's a lot going on right now. All right, I am going to stop right here and thank my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. If you have an audio project, I highly recommend John. You know, if he puts up with me and my rambling, that he can do wonders for you. All kidding aside, John is great. I love working with him. He never asks me to say anything in the show, but he really is such a strong part of what makes this podcast successful. And boy, is he nice to me and doesn't leave in all of my bloopers. So thank you, John, and thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Simms. I will see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.